Man, I think we've all experienced a situation where we're dealing with somebody who has a behavior that's not super awesome in the workplace, and it can cause all kinds of issues with your culture. I definitely have worked with and for people in the past that uh, their traits and the things that they were doing caused a lot of friction within the organization. And then also, having worked in a lot of agencies, I've been working hands on inside of organizations where the client has somebody on their team that they're just a jerk. I think that's probably the best way to say it. I think Alina has some more colorful language and colorful ways of saying that. But maybe you're that person. And how do you know whether you're the person who's causing some of unnecessary stress from toxic behavior? So, super excited to be joined today by Alina Doran. Am I saying that right?
You are.
Perfect. Yeah, Alina Doran. She has led some really high power initiatives, like being involved in the launch of Disney Plus, working through leadership and IPOs, and at some big name companies that you've all heard of. She's led and had major leadership roles. So I'm super excited to dive into toxic behavior in the workplace and how to work through that from the perspective of if you're dealing with somebody who's toxic, and then also some things to be looking at to go, hey, are you the problem, and what can you do to not be hindering your team but also not be stifling your own career potential? So Alina, super excited to have you join and talk about this.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm excited to be here with you. This was a long time coming.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. And if you're tuning in live and you have a question, you are welcome to leave a comment. And if there's opportunity, I'll bring that up in the conversation. So don't be shy. If you're here, let us know where you're joining from, and hopefully we can pull some of your questions in. But yeah, Alina, I wanted to start with there's a lot of toxic behavior that I would say is really glorified in our culture. It's glorified in movies. I'm thinking like Suits. Would be a good example of that, where there's very toxic behavior
Mhm.
and it's glorified. It's like the main characters are all doing things that are insanely toxic and cause huge issues. And as much as I like my iPhone, I like my Mac, I like some of the outcomes that come from leaders like Steve Jobs. Some of the behavior that he had was very toxic and damaging to his team. And so what I'd really love to dive into is there's a cost to that behavior that's often overlooked. And I know you've done a lot of research and you have stats behind some of the actual cost to
Mhm.
organizations of allowing that kind of toxic behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. The costs are, yes, and I love everything that you just talked about, the sort of the glorification and almost the unacceptance culturally. And for entertainment value, it can get a ha ha. But when you're actually in it, it can it can make you really sick, and stifle your career and really impede company progress. And so there are costs to health, mental health, physical health. There are costs to the individual along those lines. And there are also costs to organizations, right? When a person leaves, to replace one person typically costs 2.5 times their compensation. That's just one tiny figure, right? We all know that when someone's fed up and they leave, and usually that person is the high performer who has other options, right? They can go elsewhere. They don't need to be here. They were choosing to be here because they were passionate and committed, and now it's not worth it anymore. And they
Yeah.
leave, and they were carrying quite a load. Well, when they leave, the rest of the team is seeing them leave. And
Mhm.
that impacts the morale, impacts the team's motivation, how invested they are in the work that you're doing in initiatives. And on the financial side, there are so many price tags that I can throw at you in this conversation, but I'm going to give you three. I'm going to give you three. So 800 billion, that's billion, not million, B with a B, um, is the annual cost of employee disengagement in the United States alone. And much of it is fueled by toxic workplace environment. $800 billion, that's one. disengagement, right? So people, quiet quitting, doing just enough to get by. They're not really in it. Another price tag is 45 billion a year is the turnover cost to US businesses due to negative work culture. Just from negative work culture. 45 billion a year. That's in the United States alone. This isn't even global or, beyond our country. And then 16 billion is the cost of healthcare expenses tied to toxic workplaces that the US Surgeon General, like that's who puts warning labels on our cigarette boxes. We now have a warning from the US Surgeon General that links chronic disease like heart disease, like depression, cancer, and other stress-induced chronic illnesses to toxic workplaces. So it's very real, it's very expensive, right? And what happens when you take those price tags and you tie them to human behavior, you get disengagement, right? We have the price tag, a piece of the price tag on that. It's not even the whole thing. You have demoralization, people aren't working together. They then step into fear-driven engagement. So it's the survival-centric behavior. How is this going to affect me? People begin siloing information, hoarding, territory grabbing. They're no longer doing what's best for the initiative, for the company. They are looking to survive. And they're going to thwart each other, stab each other in the back. It's the behavior that we've probably all seen in one place or another. And that happens, it could be from one bad apple. And it happens in wonderful organizations with bright, dedicated, caring, genuine people who mean well.
Absolutely.
And often leaders that mean well, and they do things that they didn't mean to do and didn't understand, didn't appreciate the impact.
Yeah, that's $800 billion is a lot of money.
So those three price tags, that's over $860 billion.
Yeah, and then when you're talking about these leaders, especially if you have somebody who's in leadership that's toxic, they're not necessarily going to be the one leaving, right? So then some of the people who are leaving are the people that would be best for your organization to stay. And then the person who's staying is the person who maybe doesn't even, to be fair, maybe they don't even recognize. Sometimes they do, and sometimes they're just truly a jerk. But a lot of times people have behavior that they don't recognize is toxic, and and that causes a lot of issues.
That's right. That's right. We all know, the word, narcissist, psychopath, those words have become a lot more popular these days. So those definitely happen, right? And that's where there's intentionality and there's like total lack of empathy from that person, whether they're, wherever they are in terms of hierarchy. But a lot of the focus here in this work around, what I term asshole behavior is behavior that's unhelpful and the person's unaware of the impact that they're having. So the intent is there for a positive impact. They just don't know that that's what they're doing. There's not enough awareness.
Yeah, and that kind of brings us to an interesting point, because when I think of toxic behavior, the toxic behavior that really gets to me the most, is the hardest for me to deal with, is the person who's very aggressive. They make very quick gut reactions and then run with it. And a lot of times they can be demeaning. They can push other people down who have actually taken the time to understand the situation. And so when I think of toxic behavior, that's the one that comes to mind, because I think it's the one that's the hardest for me personally to deal with. But you have really documented 5 archetypes of toxic behavior, and it takes different forms. So I'd love for you to just give a quick overview of what those 5 archetypes are, and so we can have an idea of the different ways that people are introducing toxic behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, Joe, the behaviors that you just described of the most difficult symptoms are included in one of the archetypes. So I'm going to read them, and you let me know if you recognize that person in what I'm going to share with you. So there's 5, and they're represented by 5 animals. Number 1, you have the peacock. The peacock has shiny feathers. It presents something glorious and beautiful. The asshole side of the peacock behavior is it's the one that's the loudest in the room, like the shiniest and loudest, but they're actually providing the least value. It's the one that will gladly take credit for your work and not give you any credit. So we're going to go through them really quickly. Then you have the porcupine. The porcupine exhibits pushing away behaviors that tell other people who work with them that, you know what, next time I should just circumvent them. I should work around them. And those behaviors might look like, we've always done it this way. We don't need to change it. Or we don't have time for this. Or if you've ever spoken to a person, you're sharing an idea with them and you feel like they're just waiting for you to finish speaking so that they can say what they wanted to say to begin with and make you go away and they can go about their day undisturbed. That's the porcupine. And you have the turtle. The turtle it's the shrinking asshole is what I call it. So that's the one that retreats into its shell. It's the one that will do the hard work, put in the blood, sweat, tears, the ideas, sit at their desk in their office and do the work, do the substance of the work. And then when time comes to advocate for their work, to speak up, to speak to people who might disagree or question it, they disappear. They recede into background. And then often someone else will take that work and push it forward and get it over the finish line and get the glory. And that person, the turtle, will keep on turtling in the corner. And that's often a highly analytical, bright, analytical, hardworking person. And they're not being seen the way they need to be seen to feel fulfilled. And so they're underutilized and unrecognized too often. They're also the one that doesn't have boundaries and they'll just say yes to every request. It's the yes asshole.
Yep.
Right? Yes. Can you do this? Yes. Can you do it by next Tuesday? Yes. So every other need, everyone else matters more than the initiative that, that's going to matter to them and their purpose.
Absolutely.
You then have the honeybee. The honeybee is the martyr, the one that sacrifices for perceived common good. It's this place will fall apart without me, asshole. Right? So it's the one that won't delegate work because I'm the only one who knows how to do this right. I'm the one who knows this. I can't give this to anyone else. They're going to mess it up. They're not going to do it as well as I will.
Yeah.
Or of course I have to work through the weekend and, midnight and 3 a.m. and make myself sick. Do you think I want this? I don't want this. It has to be. I'm the only one. I'm going to save this world, right? I'm carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. I'm the martyr. And last but not least is the cheetah. The cheetah is the one that makes decisions and reacts while in an emotionally heightened state. So they're the ones that will be brash. They're the ones that will fire off an angry email. They're the ones that will be aggressive. They're the one that you don't know what's going to come out of their mouth sometimes. And there's a lot of volatility there in that cheetah. So those are the 5. And I'm curious, does any of them ring a bell with the challenging archetype?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because as you're talking through those archetypes, there's specific people or situations that come to mind from over the years. And I'll share, just to not throw anybody from a work standpoint under the bus. A situation that I've run into recently is actually with our HOA that I have in my community. And we have this huge a road assessment that needs to be done. And we have a porcupine who's on all the decision-making committees. And everybody is so frustrated with him and the whole, anybody who's trying to actually move anything forward, because he's always blocking it. He's always he'll come up with some totally unrealistic standard that he just made up. And we need to use this sheet for every contractor so that we're getting exactly the same bid. And I've done stuff like this enough where I'm like, dude, we don't need that. It's such a waste of time. But it's just funny because we do have to find ways to just circumvent him and basically be like, okay, here's what we're doing, get everybody else aligned, and then let him know. And everybody's going, okay, cool. Yeah, we agree. And then he's the only one left standing because you kind of have to work around him. There's no way to get him on board. And it's very demoralizing. And for 25 years before we showed up in the community, he just bulldozed everybody into his way of doing things by being annoying and,
Right.
and,
Right.
and by being prickly. So
By being prickly, right? And everyone sort of, there's a duality of people are going to just appease him and then just work, just not involve him to the extent possible, it sounds like.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And and it's a cost to him, but it's also definitely a cost to the community because there's projects that should have been focused on a decade ago that have been
Mm,
ignored because he said we don't need to do that. And then anytime anybody's brought it up, he's just been super prickly, made it so hard to get anything done that
mhm,
eventually everybody else gives up. And I guess I am persistent enough.
mm.
I'm obstinate enough to like push through that, but
Right,
it's a
right.
pain. It's added hours and hours and hours of
That's
totally wasted time for me,
that's it. That's it. And
and it's
I
annoying.
appreciate what you're bringing up here. One of the costs here is an energetic cost, right? It's brain power, it's energy and focus that the HOA would have spent elsewhere on projects that move the needle, that matter more, that are more pertinent. You could have left the meetings early, had a little extra time, and told jokes and gotten things done. And
Yeah,
instead, you're spending extra. It sounds like quite a bit of extra time strategizing around, right? Like building scaffolding and tunnels around this person just so that you can get things done.
yeah. I mean, it
So,
basically takes extra communication that he's not involved
mhm,
in.
that's right.
Uh,
That's
Probably
it.
like 2 or 3 times the amount of communication so that everybody else is aligned so that we can sideline him in the decision as much as possible, which I hate doing that. Like, well, first we try to involve him, but then the more you involve him, it actually makes it even worse because involving him is basically him saying, "We're not gonna do it your way, we're only gonna do it mine." And then everybody else kind of folds. So if you wanna get anything done, you have to go around him.
Mhm.
It's kind of the only option. Well, I mean,
That's
that's from my perspective, but I don't know if you have a different thought on that.
Well, and that is what often happens, and that's how this framework. And we're, by the way, we're talking about, just a level set. We're talking about the dark side of the animals. There's
Mm,
archetype, and what's different about this framework from other frameworks is it doesn't lock you in to say this is your identity and this is who you
mm,
are. It's not committing you to being stuck here. It's saying here's how in real time you can recognize behaviors and symptoms right now in yourself and in others and get out of your way and help them get out of their way. So we are not going to be the same in every situation. It depends on where we are. So when we recognize a set of
mm,
behaviors, this has been a reference for, well, how do I deal with this now where I am?
mm,
And something else to point out is these are the dark sides of each animal. Well, the thing about the animals is we need them all in the ecosystem because for
mm.
every one of the unhelpful behaviors, there's a huge asset, huge contribution that each one of these archetypes makes to our world, and we want them and we need them. So
Mm.
the
Yeah, that's a
idea
great
is
point.
not we're not going hunting and collecting heads on a wall,
Pelts,
right? We're not we're
porcupine
not.
pelts.
It's not like a hunting lodge with the animal heads on the
Right.
wall. We're looking to like pet and make nice, right?
Mm.
We're looking to make nice and integrate and be with all the animals and
Yeah,
recognize that we are one of the animals.
and that's kind of a good segue. So basically, we want to help other people on our team and ourselves go from being assholes to assets, right? So
Mm,
that's really what we're trying to do. So yeah, I just want to take a second because I was saying other people come to mind, but then a huge part of this is a lot of times we don't recognize when we're the one who has a problem. And I actually probably have a lot of those porcupine tendencies myself. And so, maybe that's why I know how to deal with that personality because that could be me, that for sure. So one thing I'd like to do is just sit for a second. We talked about a bunch of different traits, and just have anybody listening reflect and go, okay, I've thought of other people. We can address that a little bit, but where might that be showing up in you? what are some of those toxic traits that you're the one who's exhibiting? And we're going to dive a little bit into how to recognize whether you're the one who's
Mm,
actually the problem. If you're the one who's keeping the organization from moving forward, if you're the one who's keeping other people from doing their job by that behavior, or if you're the person who is burning yourself out and you are an asset to the team. And if you burn yourself out, that's not going to be good for the organization either. And so, Alina, I'd love for you to break down what are some ways that people can have a self-assessment to realize whether they're the person with that
yeah,
toxic behavior.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I will share, at this point, that thousands of folks have been exposed to this framework, and through talks, through workshops, and I have not yet had a single person in the audience or in a workshop or in one-on-one sessions who has said, I don't relate to anything here. I am none of these. So I don't know what this is. So far, hearing the symptoms brings an awareness to the person to say, oh, I sometimes do this. I am the shrinking asshole, or I am the fast acting asshole. I've had folks who will take this framework, they've taken screenshots of the framework, brought it home to their families, to their teenagers, who are not known to be the most reflective of people in that developmental stage, and they'll bring it to their dinner table, and that actually facilitated this framework, has facilitated discussions with their teenagers that are a
Mm.
lot more open and honest, where they've actually admitted to, oh, that's me. And then the parents will say, oh, you know what, sometimes that's me. And they're able to laugh about it. And that's what's really, I place high value on that ability to laugh at yourself. Because once you're laughing at
Mm.
yourself, you're in a much more reflective, open space to understand your behavior. So awareness of the symptoms is one
Mm.
that I would invite all the folks tuning in to consider. And another is, I would invite a reflection. And the reflection has two parts. The first part is, how do you think you show up when you are under pressure or under stress? Take a moment, reflect, think about what that looks like for you. And then when you're done with that part, go to a person who works with you frequently, if you're comfortable, who sees you in action, or someone who's very close to you in your personal life, because how we show up is often how we show up, and ask the same question to them about you. Hey, Joe, I want an honest answer. How do you see me showing up when I'm under pressure, under stress? Like, what do I do? What do you notice?
Mm.
And take the two answers that you give yourself and that the other person gave you, and compare them and see if you notice a difference.
Mm.
And that's a helpful way to start that awareness. Right? It always starts from within. Like, how are you showing up? Because sure, that person could be exhibiting those behaviors, and they're blocking progress, they're blocking innovation, they're blocking getting the most important projects done. And how are you showing up? What are you bringing in?
Mm.
And that's often the very first step is, are you bringing in preconceived notions? Did you hear rumors from prior HOA members or prior team members who said, that person over there, this is what they're like? And so are we
Mhm.
walking into the room expecting a specific result? And we're no longer really present and hearing that person, right? Another check in with self, and I don't know who hasn't been guilty of it at some point, is walking in with, all right, I have 25 minutes and I have these 4 checks that need to be checked off. And I have lunch coming up, and I have this other meeting and this other deadline, and I need to pick up my kid at 3 o'clock. And so they're running a list. They're running a list of to-dos and responsibilities, of agendas. And what they're not doing is they're not here. And they're not paying attention to what really is in the room.
Mm.
And maybe in the room there's fear, right? Maybe there's tension. Maybe there's apprehension. And so taking that pause and noticing what's in the room and how you're showing up is a very important component of starting to connect with folks who maybe they got burnt before. Right? Maybe that porcupine that you're talking about, Joe, is being the porcupine because somewhere along the way they learned that this is how they are to be
Yeah.
safe. And that's something I want to mention really quickly. And then I see you have another question. What I want to say that's really important to anyone tuning in is all of these behaviors that we're talking about, the asshole behaviors, they have developed as part of evolution. It's an evolutionary response that have been developed for the sake of self-preservation. So when something that we value and is deeply important to us gets stepped on or gets threatened to be stepped on, we become defensive and we will attack, right? We might evade. We're going to get into our defenses very much like an animal would.
Yeah, something I really appreciate about what you're getting at here is to have empathy for other people, but then also for yourself in that situation, because we learn these things, like you said, through our environment. Some of it's personality that would that would lean you in a certain direction, but then some of it's learned through workplaces that you've been in. So if you're always been in a really toxic environment, then you're going to have learned how to operate there. And then it's really easy to automatically bring that same level of toxicity to your next organization without even realizing it. And the place that then you're assuming with every interaction that you're having that anybody, like for instance, when somebody is overly aggressive and they make those quick gut decisions, and I've brought that up a couple times. We'll come back to that again
Yes.
towards the end because I'd love to workshop it a little bit because it's a real challenge for me. But whenever I run into that, it's really easy for me to just have the same reactions that I've always had, which is probably to be the shrinking asshole at that point, right? Where I'm going to just like whatever. Yeah, I'm gonna either be a turtle and go back into my shell and keep doing my thing, and then just try to figure out a way to get out of that situation when I can, so I don't have to deal with that kind of person. Or on the flip side, to be the person who's gonna just do whatever they're telling me to do and become I forget which person that was, but the martyr, right? That was at the honeybee one.
That is the
where
honeybee. That's right.
where I'm just gonna go like make extra sacrifices to get stuff done. And I'm doing that less now because I'm like, those people are never gonna be, no matter how much work I do, they're gonna have the same response. And so it's figuring out how to interact with them in a different way, how to ask better questions. But anyway, what I really appreciated was taking that time to self-reflect and to look at other people and go, hey, there's a reason they're behaving this way. And instead of just making assumptions that this is going to go the way it's gone in the past, there's some changes in behavior that I can make, and there's some changes in behavior. Well, I mean, there's changes in behavior I can make that will make me not as much of a jerk next time, not exhibit those toxic behaviors, but also it allows me to have different behavior towards people who I've struggled with them in the past because they're the jerk in the situation, and not assume that I have to treat them the same way that I've treated other people in the past, because I can take a different approach, I can have different behavior and get a much better, more positive outcome from that. So what I'd love for you to share is, okay, so we've identified who we think this other person is maybe in the organization, or we've done some of that reflection. We're working on being more present in the moment, and we've identified some of those traits in ourselves. What do you do from there once you've realized that there's toxic behavior?
Yeah, there's so much to say, by the way, about what you just shared, and maybe that's a part two. There's so much to share. The very first thing that we're doing is bringing that awareness in, right? So now we see symptoms, we see the symptoms of those unhelpful behaviors. Our awareness kicks in. And the next thing that we're doing is doing a scan. We're going inward first. That's where leadership starts every time. It doesn't start with pointing fingers. It doesn't start with titles. It starts with being honest with ourselves. Where am I showing up? How am I experience myself if I was here? So doing that check-in, and there's a lot of sort of grounding work that we do in that very first part. So a lot of the work that I do with folks in here and also in the other sort of even strategic initiatives is it's to go into the even like the breath work, the somatics, the presence, and then we get to the strategy and the execution.
Mm.
We're always oscillating between two places. What's the why? What is this all for? Who do I want to be? How do I want to say I was in this time, right? So it's July 25th, 2028. When I look back on today, how do I want to say I was? What is this all for? Is this a tiny step in a legacy I'm building? Is this, is it a promotion? Okay, what is the promotion for? So there's much to be said there, but it's the very first easy step is checking in. Am I stressed? Am I distracted? Am I coming in with judgment, preconceived notions? Am I being harsh on myself? Am I absolutely sleep deprived and have very little patience? So that's first part. The second part is when we're looking at the animal archetypes, each of these animals is hungry for something. Each of these animals, and we are one of the animals, we all want something and it's important to us. So understanding what it is that's really valuable and important to that person and to ourselves is a really important step. And once we've understood what is it that they're hungry for, we do two things. And this is where we do the deep work and the group work, and we can get into it a little bit. And that's identify what they're hungry for, feed them what they're hungry for, and don't get your own hand bitten or stung. So we're doing those two things, right? It's you're feeding them, you're seeing their needs, you are seeing what matters to them, you're connecting to them and meeting them where they are to address what's important. And what you're doing there, you're establishing safety. You're establishing psychological safety. And when you're doing that, you're able to access solutions that are much more innovative, cost efficient, unorthodox. Maybe it's the less elegant solution. Maybe it doesn't need to be over-engineered, right? Sometimes you need the big and shiny solutions that are all buttoned up, but maybe in the beginning, what you really need is the fix right now that's just effective and low cost. Maybe the shiny and the expensive is best spent elsewhere. And so it allows for a tremendous amount of collaboration and trust and that connective tissue to start to be regenerated and healed, right? And while you're doing that, you're making sure that you're preserving yourself and what matters to you and what you're hungry for. So, if it's helpful, we can run through like the example of the cheetah or the porcupine.
Yeah, what I would love to do for the next couple minutes, and you've already shared so much good information today. I think we could probably have like a 2-hour conversation easily. We're going into here, but just for the sake of time, I'd like to spend maybe like 5 minutes or so workshopping, because I'm going to be a little bit selfish here, but it lets people in on how this works. I really do struggle with. I would guess it's maybe the cheetah personality that you're talking about would be my thought from what you said. But I am a very I kind of have a weird blend of personality, but I like going really deep into something and figuring out why it's working. And I don't like overpromising at all. And so if I'm going to talk about something, I'm usually going to under promise and then really want to understand what's the expectation. And I don't want to be running into something where the expectation is something I know from the beginning is impossible to reach. And so, for example, if you're on a sales team and your sales manager is like, it's a $3 billion, I'm being hyperbolic, but whatever.
Sure.
They're setting this quota that from the very beginning, I'm like, just based on any real numbers, it's impossible to reach that. And so then, it's really easy to run into challenges with something like that for my personality, because I'm going to go in and be like, hey, here's the information, here's the numbers, how did you come up with that, and try to have a dialogue back and forth to set a reasonable expectation. But then what I found happens with those very gut reaction people, typically like a D on the disc test, they're going to come in and they see me as a porcupine probably. They're like, "Oh my
Mm.
gosh, I got to deal with Joseph." And a lot of times, they tend to get really frustrated with me because I'm asking too many questions and they want to make a quick decision. And so, um, yeah, like how do I get out of my toxic behavior and be more empathetic to what they need to be fed, but at the same time be able to set a reasonable expectation so that I don't end up getting fired or in huge trouble down the road, by just kind of giving in.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's so you're talking about, are you talking about cheetahs? So you talked about this aggressive, reactive type
Yeah,
of
I would
behavior
probably say that's
earlier.
probably I mean, from what you described, I would probably say cheetah, but
Okay.
when I'm describing that personality, I don't know what which one it fits into from your
Right.
perspective, but
Right. I mean, if you're talking about somebody who is, you're describing sort of valuing speed, valuing dominance, valuing
yeah,
control, mastery,
quick decision making,
quick decision making. By the way, that's a tremendous asset, right? So to
definitely.
say the cheetah, the bright side of the cheetah is we need leaders who are able to step into that spotlight and make the decision under pressure, high visibility, high pressure, high stakes right now with
Absolutely.
only the information that we have. We do not have time for more analysis sometimes, right? We don't have time for more information and research. We need to decide now because there's a cost to not making a decision, right? And not making a decision is by default actually making a decision. So I
Yeah.
don't want to demonize. We need cheetahs in this world very badly. And when we're looking at the dark side, we're talking about aggression, domineering, not letting people speak, right? Volatility, which, by the way, coincidentally, I'm working on 3 different succession planning engagements where leaders are being, groomed to the CEO spot, for the CEO spot, one for the CFO spot. And one of the common threads is what's between them and that position is not the actual competence for the role. Sure, sometimes there's a little skill gap. Like you need exposure on XYZ project. You need exposure to these kinds of transactions to fill in that space. The harder part and the one that gets talked about most when I do the 360s with folks, it's reactivity. All 3 of them have the feedback that I've gotten in their 360s is this person is very reactive and
Mm,
we don't know what they're going to say. And when you don't know what they're going to say, there's trouble. They kind of hit a glass ceiling because nobody wants that kind of volatility on the executive team.
absolutely.
What are they going to do in front of the board? What are they going to do in front of investors? What are they going to do at an all hands meeting when they get a question they don't like?
Mm,
So, in terms of the cheetah, for looking at archetypes, we're getting to understand what this particular person values. And I know we have just a few minutes left, so
yeah.
it sounds
Probably
like,
it's probably a little too deep of a question to
well,
fully answer,
let's
but
go. We're going to go real quick, right? Because we obviously would go workshop and go deeper, but from what you describe, it sounds like what they value, which is what they're hungry for, is that dominance, mastery, speed, right? They don't like
mm,
wasting time. They want it done. We don't need to do all of that extra unnecessary research and analysis that Joseph Lewin might feel, or someone in Joseph Lewin's shoes might say, no, you're missing information.
yeah.
And this is necessary. So there's this tug of war, what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
How does that resonate?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Totally.
So it
Exactly.
sounds like in the tug of war, there's tension, and what's being threatened is their dominance, mastery, control. Maybe they have pride in being fast to react and produce results. And maybe they perceive your analysis as threat to that. maybe therefore they're categorizing the analysis and thoughtfulness as slowness and a speed bump.
Yep.
And so at that point, what they are going to value now, the way that we approach anyone in your position is there's 3 bowls that we feed their hunger from. There is the language bowl. What language are we going to be deploying? How are we going to be showing up? How are we going to make sure that we are connecting and meeting them where they are? The energy bowl. So are you choosing to match? Are you choosing to contrast? Are you choosing to stay as is? And there's also the approach bowl. The approach bowl might be, how frequently are you meeting? Are your meetings too long? Are they too short? Are they too frequent? Whose turf are they on? So there's a lot that we would sit through and work through, but I want to state some of those questions here for folks tuning in. So we would kind of go into that. But if we're going to highline, we're really going to look at the cheetah. They value in the language, they probably value directness.
Yeah.
They probably value concise language. They probably value an appreciation of urgency. Appreciating the urgency that they see may start to make them feel safe. That the intention isn't to go off-roading into analysis land and play with, different ways that, different possible outcomes and create new models as an intellectual exercise. It's, how is this related to urgency? How is this needed right now? So when we are meeting them where they are and making them feel safe that we will take action and we'll take it quickly. We're going to take this quick look at the analysis. There's much more that we can do, but we're not going to do all of that because there isn't time for that. But here's what we will do. And at that point, meeting their analysis potentially with meeting their urgency with logic. They will respond to logic. They will respond to fact patterns and lead with the bottom line. That's going to be really important. So a person who's analytical might see the importance of talking about the different use cases and the reasoning. But when interacting with a cheetah, what might be highly effective is to start with the bottom line. And that's the language bowl alone. Now, I personally love starting with bottom lines often. That's my personal leaning, like just get to the point. And then we can take the time and slow down. But first we're going to get to the point. And that's in terms of language. When I say language, I mean written, verbal, body, all 3. So demonstrating that you recognize that this is what they're hungry for, this is what they value, and they're not gonna be hungry. You're gonna feed them what they're hungry for.
Yeah, no, I really resonate with what you're saying because I tend to be more of an open processor and can get into the weeds because is part of where I can bring value, but at the same time, getting to the point, getting to the bottom line and making sure that is aligned with what they're trying to do. That makes a ton of sense. And if I lead with that more often, and probably some of that is just doing more preparation also, like if I know I'm going to be meeting with somebody who is that kind of a person, just doing prep ahead of time so that I'm prepared if they do ask me a question. Because a lot of times for me, it's like, okay, I'm going to ask them some questions. I'm going to try to understand what they're looking for, what their goal is. And then as soon as I start asking those questions to that kind of person, they tend to get frustrated. But I'm like, how am I supposed to answer your question if I don't know what you're looking for? Like, there's 100 ways we could go with that. But
that's right.
At the same time, like if I maybe do, and I'm curious, I'm throwing this out just as a thought, if I do more research and more prep going in, knowing I'm going to talk to somebody like that, and I come in and I say, hey, we've looked at a bunch of stuff. The bottom line is this thing, or whatever, or, knowing that they're could ask me one of five different things that we're working on, just going in prep to respond to that rather than going in and trying to understand, maybe trying to preempt a little bit more and go, well, what do I think they're looking for, and try to
That's right.
prepare for that ahead.
That's right. Because there's safety that you seek as well, is what I'm hearing, right? The safety to be right, the safety to, I need to have the information so that I give you what you need. I want to make sure that it's the right fit. I want to make sure I don't give you the wrong thing, because that's my credibility, right? I'm not going
Yeah.
to be giving you the wrong solutions. That's how I am going to, under promise and under deliver, as Joseph Lewin,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
So,
very much so.
and so it's starting with whether it's a hypothesis, whatever that bottom line is, starting there. And by the way, with a cheetah, oftentimes assume that if it's a 30-minute meeting, what if it were to be cut short? What is the
Mm,
most important thing for you to connect on? What is the most important aspect of the meeting that cannot be replaced with, with an email?
mm,
What needs to
that's
happen
really
right
good.
now? What if you had 10, 15 minutes? What's the bottom line? That's the most. So in terms of language, communication, body language, I'm here, and that's presence. I'm here. Here's the urgency is, here's the bottom line. Here's where we're landing, right? And maybe there's components that we don't have. Here's what we know. Here's what we don't know. Here's where we need
Yeah.
more information. That's also the bottom line of creating expectation that there'll be more Q&A. There'll be more analysis. But I'm
Mm,
satisfying your need to know right now, so that you have that lay of the land. So that's one bowl that we're feeding from, right?
yeah,
Another
I love
bowl
that.
is the energy bowl, and that is oftentimes when folks are not a cheetah. So, and turtle and cheetah is a great combination of sort of this opposing chemistry. We do a lot of the pairings of archetypes. You may be more a softer, calmer, steadier energy. There's a lot of value in that, right?
Mhm.
Turtles are here for a reason, and they're a highly, highly valuable asset. We need
Yeah.
every animal, and every animal brings tremendous value. They may not need like the public praise on stage. Maybe what drives a turtle is knowing that there's appreciation of the value and quality of their work.
Mm,
Maybe that appreciation looks like they're being brought into more trust. They're being, their advice is being sought more often. It doesn't
yeah,
need to be loud. It can be quiet, but they're getting juicier, more interesting analysis. And that's interesting and challenging to them. And they
yeah.
feel that they're being valued and appreciated. Does that resonate?
Yeah, no, definitely.
Okay.
It's that's helpful.
Okay. So then in energy terms, and I know we're going to run out of time to make it quick. You're When you're meeting a cheetah, you, Joe, don't want to match their energy. You don't need to match their tempo.
Mm,
You can stay steady and grounded. Stay steady and grounded. That's an advantage. You don't need to be jumping with them and get reactive, because that only amplifies the reactivity.
mm,
And then in terms of approach, it might be their turf or neutral turf. The meetings often are beneficial to be shorter in length,
mm,
or leaving room, assuming that you're going to end them earlier. That's going to be, a cheetah might find that very valuable and very, very unusual, that you took care of what matters most to both of you quickly.
yeah,
So then you have room in the meeting. When you have room and time left in the meeting, they might feel safe at that point, and the connection might deepen. You might
mm,
understand each other's value more. They might then have the space, because they're less reactive, to say, Joe, that is such thoughtful analysis. I never thought about that.
mm,
You know what? We should look into that more. They will then have the space to see. It's like, when you're interacting with a person who's very activated, right? They're up here emotionally. They don't have the space to hear new ideas, and they're
mm.
not going to be as open. They're going to be much more contracted.
That's
So
huge.
when there's a de-escalation and safety there, they can actually hear frequencies that wouldn't have been accessible to them.
Yeah, that's super helpful, and I think the prep part for me is probably the biggest piece. Is I need to just make a list of the things that that's almost part of the challenge, right? Is going in not just with the information that I need for the actual decision, but going in with the information of what do I think that this person is going to ask me in this conversation, and have a quick I would probably benefit from having a quick script to respond to that with the bottom line, to your point. And then I tend to be more relational, and so the people uh, who the cheetah often doesn't understand, those people I tend to get along with super well, and I'm able to understand the things that they're getting at. And so those people I tend to have great relationship with, right? And then, I'm willing to take the extra time and not cut the meeting short. But then on the flip side, that's the exact opposite of what a cheetah wants, right? And so that's probably part of why I run into that challenge, is like trying to gather too much information on the call, trying to go a little bit too deep for what I need, so that I'm fed with what I need, and then run over. And then if it's running over a meeting, then a cheetah's gonna be annoyed. They're already skipped halfway out of the meeting by halfway, 15 minutes before it's done. They're already skipped on to the next thing in their mind. And so yeah,
Exactly. It
super
might
helpful.
already be somewhere else, and that's right. And it's not limited to only the cheetah, right? You have it's very frequent practice to, people have meetings back to back.
Yeah.
And when they're back to back, they're become highly aware that they only have 3 minutes left, 2 minutes left.
Yep.
So and maybe there is room. It's taking care of the most important in the beginning,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
If
that's huge.
if we say nothing else, if we do nothing else in this meeting, we connected on this point, and that's going to take us far.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, again, we could keep going on for a long time. So we've already gone for 52 minutes, and as you can see, my challenge is always running overtime, not running under time. So, uh, really, really appreciate all the information that you shared. It's not only really good information, but I wanted to workshop this, um, because I think it shows the value of the archetypes when we actually dig into it and look at it in a real world circumstance. But then also selfishly, it is a real challenge that I have, that I run into regularly. So that gives me some personal takeaways from this as well, and hopefully some folks listening can take away some of those same things too. So, what are some ways that somebody's listening to this and they go, "Hey, maybe I'm a cheetah, or maybe maybe I'm a porcupine. I'm kind of seeing some of that information coming out." Um, what uh, what's the next step for them to connect with you and get some help on getting fed in the areas they need to, and maybe being a little bit less toxic themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. They can reach out to me either through my LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find. There are not many Alina Dorans on LinkedIn. Message me. I answer my own messages. It's not an assistant. It's not a virtual assistant. It's not a robot. It's me. And they can also reach me on my website, highlineleadership.com. And there's a let's chat button, and we can get into an exploratory conversation and see what's up and how we can partner together.
Love it. Yeah, and just to try to make it super clear for people, you're doing essentially like executive leadership coaching. Is that kind of the baseline of what you do? You come in and help individuals and teams be
Yeah,
better
I help.
leaders.
That's right. I help teams, founders, organizations, and individual executives to lead better, and that looks like it can look like coaching work. It can look like leadership development work. It also looks like strategy and advisory work.
Awesome. Well, yeah, if you listened and you resonate with anything, I'd highly recommend reaching out to Alina. I've gotten to know her a little bit over the last 2 or 3 months, and she's awesome. So definitely reach out. And thanks again, Alina, for joining us. And for anybody tuning in, thanks so much. We'll see you on the next live.
Thanks for having me, Joe.